The probate courtroom smelled like old wood and broken families. I sat at the defendant's table. Defendant in my own grandmother's will contest while my parents' attorney paced in front of the judge's bench like a shark circling prey. Your Honor, Marcus Chun said, his voice dripping with practiced sympathy. My clients have been estranged from their mother for over 30 years due to their daughter's manipulation. Mrs. Eleanor Ashford changed her will just 6 months before her death, leaving everything to her granddaughter, Sarah. Everything. A woman she barely knew, according to my clients. Judge Patricia Hendricks looked over her reading glasses at me. She was 60-something, silver hair pulled back tight, the kind of judge who'd seen every family drama play out in this courtroom. Ms. Coleman, she said, you'll have a chance to respond. Mr. Chun, continue. My mother sat behind her attorney, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. Dad had his arm around her shoulders. The picture of a grieving son. They'd perfected this performance over 9 months of legal proceedings. 9 months since my grandmother died. 9 months since they'd appeared at the funeral. The first time I'd seen them in 11 years. 9 months since they'd filed to contest the will. Chun pulled out a poster. Board he actually had visual aids showing a timeline. Eleanor Ashford's will from 2010 left her estate equally to her son, James Ashford, and his wife, Patricia. Standard family distribution. Then, in October 2023, just 6 months before she passed, she executed a new will, leaving everything to Sarah Coleman with only one stipulation: that Sarah not contact James or Patricia about the inheritance until after Eleanor's death. He turned to face me. That stipulation alone suggests undue influence. Why would a grandmother specifically prohibit her granddaughter from mentioning an inheritance to the rightful heirs unless she knew it was wrong? Objection, my attorney said. Sarah Mitchell was a sharp woman in her 40s who'd taken my case pro bono after reading the will. Calls for speculation. Sustained, Judge Hendricks said, but she was looking at me with new interest. Chun wasn't done. Furthermore, Your Honor, we have evidence that Sarah Coleman rarely visited her grandmother. Phone records show only 14 calls between them in the 2 years before the will change. My clients maintained their daughter manipulated an elderly, isolated woman. Mom's sob was perfectly timed. Dad squeezed her shoulder. I watched them perform. The same way I'd watched them perform my entire childhood whenever a teacher questioned why I came to school in the same clothes 3 days in a row. The same way they'd perform for my grandmother when she'd ask why I was UNT at family Christmas that year, or Thanksgiving, or Easter. Sarah, my attorney touched my arm. You okay? I nodded. I was always okay. Being okay was my survival skill. Chun brought out his star witness, Dr. Raymond Foster, a geriatric psychiatrist who'd never met my grandmother, but had reviewed her medical records. In my professional opinion, Dr. Foster said from the witness stand, Mrs. Ashford showed signs of cognitive decline in her final year, short-term memory issues, confusion about dates. This makes her vulnerable to influence, particularly from someone she trusted. And would you say, Chun asked, that someone could exploit that vulnerability to convince her to change a will? Absolutely. It's unfortunately common in elderly patients. Sarah Mitchell stood for cross-examination. Dr. Foster, did you ever meet Eleanor Ashford? No, but did you perform any cognitive tests on her? I reviewed. Did you speak to her primary care physician, Dr. Angela Torres, who saw her monthly until her death? I didn't feel it was necessary, Your Honor. I'd like to call Dr. Torres to testify. Sarah pulled out her own documentation. She's waiting outside. Chun obeyed. Judge Hendricks allowed it. Dr. Torres was a small woman with kind eyes. She took the stand and confirmed what I already knew. My grandmother had been sharp until the day she died. Eleanor had perfect cognitive function, Dr. Torres said firmly. She managed her own finances, her own medications, drove herself to appointments. We played chess every month after her checkups. She beat me consistently until the very end. Did she ever mention her granddaughter, Sarah? Sarah Mitchell asked. Dr. Torres smiled at me. Constantly. Eleanor talked about Sarah every visit. How proud she was, how worried she was. Worried about what? About Sarah's parents finding out about the inheritance before Eleanor died, she said. Dr. Torres paused, choosing her words carefully. She said her son and daughter-in-law would make Sarah's life hell if they knew, so she'd structured everything to protect Sarah until after she passed. Mom's tissue dabbing stopped. No further questions, Sarah said. Chun tried damage control. Dr. Torres, isn't it possible that Eleanor's affection for her granddaughter was manufactured by Sarah's manipulation? Dr. Torres looked at him like he'd suggested the earth was flat. I've been a physician for 30 years, Mr. Chun. I know the difference between genuine love and manipulation. Eleanor loved Sarah. Period. We broke for lunch. I sat alone at a diner 3 blocks from the courthouse while Sarah took calls from her office. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered anyway. You're going to lose. It was my mother. The judge sees right through you. Mom, don't call me that. You gave up that right when you stole from us. I didn't steal anything. Grandma left me. She left you. Oh, you are inheritance. Money that should have been ours. Do you have any idea what your father and I have been through? The sacrifices we made. I almost laughed. The sacrifices they made. Like the time they forgot to pick me up from school for a week straight when I was 8, or the time they spent my college fund on a boat, or the 11 years they did unspeak to me after I refused to co-sign a loan for them. Grandma made her choice, I said quietly. Because you poisoned her against us. You always were a manipulative little bitch. She hung up. I stared at my untouched sandwich. The waitress, an older woman with a name tag that read, Donna, refilled my coffee. You okay, honey? I'm okay, I said automatically. She patted my shoulder. You don't look okay. But that's all right. You don't have to be okay all the time. It was such a small kindness that I almost cried right there in the booth. The afternoon session started with financial records. Chun projected my grandmother's bank statements on a screen, highlighting transfers to my account. Over the last 2 years of Eleanor's life, he said, she transferred $47,000 to Sarah Coleman. Why would she do this if not under duress? Sarah Mitchell stood. If I may, Your Honor, I'd like Sarah to explain those transfers. Judge Hendricks nodded. Miss Coleman approached the stand. I'd been dreading this moment for 9 months. The moment I'd have to talk about things I'd kept private for over a decade. I was sworn in. Sat down, looked out at the courtroom where my parents sat with their practiced expressions of concern. Miss Coleman, Sarah Mitchell, said gently, can you explain the $47,000 in transfers? I took a breath. My grandmother was helping me pay off my student loans. Why would she do that? Because I asked her to. I graduated with $52,000 in debt and I was drowning. Why not ask your parents for help? This was it. The question I'd been avoiding, because my parents kicked me out when I was 17. I haven't had financial help from them since. Mom's gasp was theatrical. Dad shook his head sadly. Like I was lying, Chun jumped up. Your Honor, this is completely unsubstantiated. It's documented, Sarah said calmly, pulling out a folder. Sarah was placed in foster care for the last 6 months of her senior year. I have the state records right here. The courtroom went quiet. Judge Hendricks took the documents. Read them. Deme. Looked at my parents. Is this accurate, Mr. and Mrs. Ashford? My father stood, Your Honor. That was a misunderstanding. We had some financial difficulties, and Sarah went to stay with family friends temporarily. Family friends? I heard my voice crack. You told CPS I was uncontrollable and you couldn't handle me. I spent 6 months in 3 different foster homes before I turned 18. You were difficult, Mom said, standing up despite Chun pulling at her sleeve. You refused to follow rules. We did what we had to do. I asked you not to spend my college fund. That's what made me difficult. Judge Hendricks banged her gavel. Mrs. Ashford, sit down. Miss Coleman, continue. My hands were shaking. After I aged out of foster care, I put myself through community college, worked 3 jobs, transferred to state school, graduated with honors, My grandmother, she was the only family member who came to my graduation. Did you maintain a relationship with your parents during this time? Sarah asked. They didn't want one. I tried calling for 3 years. They'd hang up or not answer. Eventually, I stopped trying. When did you reconnect with your grandmother? I never lost connection with her. She visited me in foster care. She helped me move into my first apartment. She came to every birthday, every holiday. I had to stop. Breathe. She was the only parent I had. Sarah pulled out more documents. Your Honor, I have 11 years of correspondence between Sarah and Eleanor. Letters, emails, cards. Eleanor documented everything. Judge Hendricks wanted to see them. While she read, Mom leaned forward and whispered loud enough for me to hear. You'll lose everything, and you'll deserve it. I didn't respond. I'd learned a long time ago not to engage. Oh my God, Sarah whispered, reading over my shoulder. The documents detailed a CIA operation from 1989 to 1994. Operation Arctic Dawn. A deep-cover intelligence program that had placed agents in various countries during the final years of the Cold War. My grandmother's name was on page 3. Eleanor Ashford, codename Aurora, stationed in East Berlin from 1990 to 1994. Your grandmother was a spy, Sarah said, stunned. One kept reading. The operation had been classified for 30 years. The documents in this folder were scheduled for declassification in 2024, just months after my grandmother died. But there was more. Page 7 had my father's name. James Ashford had been questioned in 1992 about potential security breaches in his mother's operation. He'd been dating a woman, my mother, Patricia, who had suspicious connections to foreign nationals. The investigation had concluded that James was unknowingly compromised. My mother had been using him to gather information about Eleanor's movements. The CIA had given Eleanor a choice: retire from service immediately and cut all contact with her son, or face the possibility that her son would be prosecuted for espionage. She'd chosen to protect him. She'd retired. Moved back to the States, told James they'd had a falling out and cut contact. She'd saved his life and he'd never known. The journal was worse. In my grandmother's handwriting, she'd documented 30 years of watching from a distance, of hiring private investigators to make sure James was okay, of secretly paying off his debts when he and Patricia got in over their heads financially, of watching me be born and being kept away because Patricia knew somehow Eleanor was the reason her espionage career had ended before it started. The final entry was dated 6 months before she died. Patricia called today. She'd found out about my cancer. I don't know how. She demanded money, said if I didn't give them $200,000, she'd make sure I never saw Sarah again. I told her to go to hell. Then I called Harold Burke and changed my will. Everything goes to Sarah. Let James and Patricia fight for it. Let them expose themselves. Sarah deserves to know the truth. And if they push hard enough, if they take it to court, Sarah will find this safe. She'll find these documents. She'll find out what her parents really are. I'm sorry, my darling girl. I'm sorry you have to learn it this way. But you needed to know that you didn't deserve what they did to you. You were never the problem. They were. I sat on the floor of the library, the journal in my lap, and cried. Sarah gave me 10 minutes. Then she gently said, "We need to get back to court." Judge Hendricks reconvened at exactly 4 p.m. The courtroom was packed now. Word had spread that something unusual was happening. Miss Coleman, the judge said, "Did you retrieve the documents?" "Yes, Your Honor." "And do you wish to submit them as evidence?" I looked at my parents. Mom was leaning forward, trying to see what I was holding. Dad looked nervous. "Your Honor," I said, "before I submit anything, I need to ask, are you familiar with Operation Arctic Dawn?" The courtroom went dead silent. Judge Hendricks's face was expressionless. "Where did you hear that name?" "It's in these documents. They're from my grandmother's safe." Approach the bench. "Mr. Chun, Ms. Mitchell, you too." We huddled at the bench. I handed Judge Hendricks the folder. She opened Italiano. The government seal was on top. She saw it, and her hand actually trembled. Jesus Christ, she whispered. Where did you get this? From my grandmother, Eleanor Ashford. Codename Aurora. Judge Hendricks looked up at me with new eyes. Your grandmother was Aurora? You knew about the operation. My father was involved in Arctic Dawn. He was agency. I know these documents were scheduled for declassification this year, but she stopped. Looked at Chun. Mr. Chun, you need to see this. Chun read the first page. His face went white. Sarah Mitchell was reading over his shoulder. What does this mean? Judge Hendricks closed the folder carefully. It means this case is over. Mr. Chun, I strongly suggest you consult with your clients about withdrawing their contests. Your Honor, I don't understand the woman in these documents. Eleanor Ashford was a CIA operative. The security breach mentioned on page 7 involves Mr. James Ashford and his then-girlfriend, now wife, Patricia Ashford. If these documents are authentic and I have every reason to believe they are, then your clients were potentially involved in espionage activities. Chun's hands were shaking now. I need to speak with my clients. You do that. We're in recess for 30 minutes. I watched through the courtroom window as Chun pulled my parents into a conference room. I couldn't hear what was being said, but I could see their faces. Mom's expression went from confused to horrified. Dad looked like he might be sick. Chun was gesturing frantically, pointing at documents. 20 minutes later, they emerged. Chun approached the bench. Your Honor, my clients wish to withdraw their contest of the will. Smart choice, Judge Hendricks said dryly. However, Chun looked at me. They're requesting a brief statement to the court. To explain, I'll allow it. Mr. Ashford, you have 5 minutes. My father stood. He'd aged a decade in the last 30 minutes. Your Honor, he said, his voice rough, I didn't know. About my mother? About what she did? He stopped, swallowed hard. She told me she wanted distance, that she disapproved of my life choices. I thought for 30 years. I thought she hated me. That doesn't excuse what you did to Sarah, Judge Hendricks said. I know. He looked at me for the first time in hours. Sarah, don't, I said. Don't try to apologize now. I didn't know she'd cut me off to protect me. If I'd known, you would have what? Been a better father? Actually, raised me instead of dumping me in foster care. Mom stood up. We were young. We made mistakes. You blackmailed your dying mother-in-law for $200,000. I pulled out the journal. It's documented. She wrote about your phone call, about your threat. The color drained from her face. You knew about Arctic Dawn, didn't you? Primera. Ask it. That's why you've always hated my grandmother, because she's the reason your own intelligence career ended. Judge Hendricks held up a hand. Mrs. Ashford, I strongly suggest you stop talking. Anything you say right now could be used in a federal investigation. Mom sat down hard. Judge Hendricks looked at the courtroom. This will contest is withdrawn. Eleanor Ashford's will stands as written. All assets transferred to Sarah Coleman. Furthermore, I'm recommending that these documents be turned over to the appropriate federal authorities for review. She looked at my parents. Mr. and Mrs. Ashford, I suggest you retain criminal counsel. Operation Arctic Dawn may be declassified, but espionage charges have no statute of limitations. Chun was already packing his briefcase, probably calculating how fast he could distance himself from this case. Ms. Coleman, Judge Hendricks said, you're free to go. And for what it's worth, your grandmother would be proud of you. I walked out of the courthouse into late afternoon sunshine. Sarah Mitchell walked beside me. What are you going to do now? She asked. I don't know. Process this, I guess. The estate is yours. The house, the investments, everything. You're looking at about $2.4 million total. The number didn't feel real. Sarah, a voice called. I turned. My father was standing at the courthouse steps. Mom conspicuously absent. Can we talk? Please. I looked at Sarah Mitchell. She nodded. I'll wait in the car. Dad and I stood in awkward silence. I didn't know, he said finally, about what your mother did. The blackmail, I swear. But you knew about kicking me out. About the foster homes. He flinched. Your mother said it was temporary, that you'd come back once you learned some respect. I was 17. Dad, I asked you not to steal my college fund. We needed that money for a boat. You bought a boat. He couldn't meet my eyes. I know it was wrong. But Patricia said he stopped. Patricia said? What? She said you were just like my mother. Manipulative? Controlling? She said if we gave in to you, you'd ruin our lives the way my mother had ruined hers. Her life was ruined because she tried to sell out a CIA operative. My grandmother saved your life by cutting you off. I know that now. We stood there in silence. Somewhere in the distance, traffic hummed, life continuing like nothing had changed. I'm sorry, he said finally. For all of it, for believing, Patricia, Ovi, for not being the father you deserved. Okay, that's it. Just okay. I looked at him, really looked at him. The gray hair, the lines around his eyes, the way his shoulders slumped, like he was carrying something too heavy. What do you want me to say, Dad? That it's fine. That we can start over. I spent 11 years hoping you'd call, hoping you'd show up and say you were sorry, and you only came back when you thought there was money in it. That's not, he stopped, because it was true and we both knew it. Grandma left me a letter, I said, in the safe. She told me I could walk away. Take a settlement. Not fight. Why didn't you? Because Mom called me a manipulative bitch and said I'd lose everything, and I realized I'm done letting people treat me like I'm worthless. He nodded slowly. The federal investigation. Do you know what that means for us? No, but I know a good lawyer if you need one. I gestured toward Sarah's car. Sarah, my daughter. I mean, I know which Sarah you meant. Do you think he paused? Do you think we could see each other sometime? Try to, build something. I thought about it, really thought about it. Maybe, I said. But not with Patricia. If you want a relationship with me, it's just you. She's done enough damage. His face crumpled. She's my wife. And she blackmailed your dying mother, so you need to make a choice. I walked away before he could answer. 6 months later, the house sold for $1.8 million. I kept a few things: the painting of Arctic Dawn, the journal, my grandmother's reading chair. The rest went to auction. The federal investigation into my parents concluded that, while my mother had been gathering intelligence about my grandmother's movements in the early 90 segundas, the statute of limitations had expired on most charges. She pleaded guilty to extortion for the blackmail attempt and got 18 months probation. My father divorced her 3 months after the court case ended. He sends me emails sometimes. Updates about his life. Apologies for the past. Requests to meet for coffee. I haven't responded to most of them, but I haven't deleted them either. Sarah Mitchell and I became friends. Real friends. She introduced me to her book club, her running group, her chosen family. People who accepted me without needing me to prove my worth. I used part of the inheritance to pay off my student loans completely. The rest I invested, with enough set aside to buy a small condo overlooking the water. It has a library not as grand as my grandmother's, but enough for the collection of books I'm building. The painting of Arctic Dawn hangs over my fireplace. Every time I look at it, I think about my grandmother, about the secrets she kept to protect the people she loved, about the price she paid for those secrets, about the strength it takes to do the right thing when the right thing costs you everything. 1 year after the court case, I got a package in the mail. No return address. Inside was a declassified government document, a full Operation Arctic Dawn file. A post-it note was stuck to the front. Thought you should have this. J.H. Judge Hendricks. I spent 3 days reading through it, learning about my grandmother's missions, the intelligence she'd gathered, the lives she'd saved. On page 247, there was a commendation letter from the director of the CIA, Eleanor Ash, codename Aurora, has demonstrated extraordinary courage and sacrifice in service of her country. When faced with an impossible choice between her mission and her family, she chose family, but in doing so, she also chose the greater good. Her son lives free because of her sacrifice. Her country is safer because of her service. She is the kind of operative we strive to be. Courageous, principled, and unfailingly human. I cried, reading it. Then I called the one person I knew would understand. Dad. There was a long pause. Sarah. Is that you? Yeah. It's me. I was wondering, do you want to meet for coffee? We met at a diner halfway between our cities. He was already there when I arrived. Sitting in a booth, coffee growing cold in front of him. You came, he said, standing up. I said I would. We sat in awkward silence for a moment. I got the declassified file. I said Abahut Grandma, about Arctic Dawn. I did too. The CIA sent it to me directly. I think they wanted me to know what she did for me. Have you read it? Every word. 3 times. His voice cracked. She saved my life. And I never even thanked her. I thought she hated me for 30 years. She didn't hate you. She loved you so much she gave up everything. He wiped his eyes. I'm trying to be better. I left Patricia. I'm in therapy. I'm working on understanding why I let her control me for so long. That's good. Is it enough? For you? I thought about it. I don't know yet, but it's a start. We talked for 2 hours. About the past. Carefully. About the future. Hopefully. About my grandmother, who'd connected us even after death. When we parted, he hugged me. It was awkward and tentative, but it was something. Can we do this again? He asked. In a month. Same place. I'll be here. 2 years later, I'm sitting in my library, the painting of Arctic Dawn on the wall above my desk, writing this all down. My therapist suggested it might help processing everything that happened, everything I learned. Tomorrow is my grandmother's birthday. Dad and I are meeting at her grave. It's become our tradition once a year. We visit together. We bring flowers. We tell her about our lives. We thank her for the sacrifices she made. Last month, I started a foundation in her name, the Eleanor Ashford Scholarship Fund for Foster Youth Pursuing Higher Education. It's funded entirely by the inheritance she left me, and it will help kids who, like me, are trying to build a future without family support. The first scholarship recipient is a 17-year-old girl who aged out of foster care and wants to study international relations. When I met her, I saw myself. That same determination. That same fear that she's not good enough. I told her she is, that she's more than enough. That the family you're born into doesn't define you. The family you choose does. My phone buzzes, a text from my dad. See you tomorrow. I'm proud of you. I text back. See you tomorrow. I don't say I'm proud of him yet, but I'm getting there. The Arctic Dawn painting catches the late afternoon light, blues and purples, and that specific pink of a sunrise I've seen 100 times but never really understood. It's not just a painting of dawn. It's a painting of new beginnings, of the light that comes after the longest night. My grandmother knew that. She knew that sometimes you have to go through the darkness to get to the dawn. That sometimes the truth hurts before it heals. That sometimes the only way to be free is to stop protecting people from the consequences of their own choices. She taught me that, even from beyond the grave. And I'm teaching it to others now. The scholarship recipient, her name is Maria, sent me an email today. She got accepted to Georgetown, full ride with the Ashford Scholarship. I don't know how to thank you, she wrote. You changed my life. I wrote back. You changed your own life. I just helped you see that you could. Because that's what my grandmother did for me. She didn't save me. She showed me I could save myself. She gave me the truth, painful as it was, so I could be free. And in the end, that's the greatest inheritance of all. Not the money. Not the house. Not even the vindication in court. The inheritance was this: The knowledge that I am not defined by the people who failed to love me. I am defined by the person who loved me enough to give me the truth, even when it hurt, even when it cost her everything. I look at the painting one more time. Arctic dawn. The light after darkness. The beginning after the end. And I understand, finally, what my grandmother was trying to tell me all along. Dawn always comes. You just have to survive the night. Epilogue. 5 years after the court case, I'm sitting in a university lecture hall. I've been invited to speak to a class on family law about inheritance contests and undue influence cases. The professor introduces me Sarah Coleman, who successfully defended her grandmother's will against a high-profile contest. Her case has become a teaching example in probate law. I don't mention the CIA. The declassified documents are public record now, but they're not the point of this story. The point is what I tell the students. Family law is unique because it's where love and money intersect. And when money gets involved, you discover who people really are. My grandmother's will wasn't contested because my parents thought she was manipulated. It was contested because they wanted money they felt entitled to. A student raises her hand. How did you prove they were wrong? I told the truth. That's it. The truth was documented. The truth was verifiable. And most importantly, the truth was on my side. But didn't it hurt? Fighting your own parents in court. I think about this. It hurt more to let them believe they were right. To let them treat me like I was worthless. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself, and for others, is to stop protecting them from the truth. After the lecture, a young woman approaches me. She's maybe 22? Nervous. Ms. Coleman. I just wanted to say thank you. I'm in a similar situation with my family. They're contesting my grandfather's will and I thought maybe I should just give up. Let them have it. But hearing your story ... double quotes, don't give up, I say firmly. If your grandfather wanted you to have that inheritance, there was a reason. Honor that reason. Fight for it. Even if it means losing my family. Here's what I learned. You can't lose what you never really had. If your family only values you for what you can give them, they're not your family. They're just people you're related to. She nods, eyes bright with tears. Thank you. I watch her walk away and I think about my grandmother. About the painting, about Arctic dawn, about how the darkest part of night is right before the sunrise, and how if you can just hold on, just survive until dawn, the light will come. It always does.